and welcome to this how-to session on science communication. As all of you participating in the Webfest will know, we have a number of projects going on that are themed around science communication, but I hope that you'll realize that science communication is very important for all of you, no matter what project you're working on, particularly in the context of this Webfest, where we're asking you to present your work in a very short and concise manner tomorrow. Now, of course, you're all doing excellent work, working on very exciting projects, and it's important to ensure maximum impact, that they're communicated in the best way possible. So I'm very pleased to announce that we have a short talk from you from our colleague at CERN, Sarah Charlie. She's responsible for US communications and is based in the CERN press office, although is employed by Fermilab and writes for Symmetry magazine. Unfortunately, Sarah can't be with us in person today. However, she's recorded a short video presentation, just under 10 minutes, which I'm going to invite you all to watch in one moment. And then at the end of that, if you have any questions related to science communication, I would like to field those, and perhaps we can start a little bit of a discussion about science communication, its importance, both in general and in the context of our Webfest this weekend. So thank you very much, and over to Sarah.
Hello, Webfest 2020. This is Sarah Charlie recording for you remotely next to the CERN beam dump in my apartment. To quickly introduce myself, I have been based in the CERN press office for 6 years. I do the US CERN communication and visit coordination. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to get people to care about your project when they have no idea what you're talking about. So before we dive into this subject, I first want to start with a quick story. So this story happened about 2 years ago involving my friend Mio. So my friend Mio, she attended Stanford University before then going and getting her medical degree at a university in Sweden. She's fluent in 4 languages and she's a ballerina. So the point of my story is that my friend Mio is really, really, really smart and really dedicated. So one night I was out with Mio at a bar and I mentioned antimatter, which is something that people have been looking at through the CERN research for a very long time. Mio's response is, "That's really hard." And for me, this was a bit confusing because my friend Mio is one of the smartest people I know, and as soon as I mention antimatter, she's lost, she's gone. So this brings us to how to successfully communicate about topics that your audience might not have been exposed to before. So when you're communicating, your very first goal is that you want people to understand the ideas you're trying to convey. With my friend Mio, I failed. I mentioned antimatter, she didn't get it. I tried, and eventually the topic just dwindled out. So that's the first goal. People understand the ideas you're trying to convey. And the second goal is that people do something with that information. So either they remember it so that they can apply it later, they share it with their friends and family, they share it with people who might have an interest in your project. So how are these goals different than the goals we normally set for ourselves? Unlike most goals we set for ourselves, it has to do with our own personal performance. But when it comes to communication, our goals are not about us anymore. It is about our audience and being able to reach through to them and engage with them in a way that they understand what we're trying to talk about and that they are then prepared to use that information in their lives. So we're going to shift the focus away from ourselves during this presentation, and instead we're going to focus a bit on our audience. So a really hard part when you're getting into a topic that your audience might not have been exposed to before, such as what you've been working on in the Webfest, it can be really difficult to know, where do I even start? There's so much information. It's this entire universe. How can I start communicating about this to an audience who doesn't know? So we're going to leave the world of computing and high energy physics for a second and enter a different world, Lord of the Rings. So let's enter this universe and we're going to take a character and we're going to ask him a very simple question. So everyone, this is Faramir. Say hi, Faramir. We're just going to ask Faramir. So Faramir, what would you like to see happen in Middle-earth over the next few years? Pretty easy softball question, right? Here's how Faramir responds. For myself, I would see the white tree and flower again in the courts of the kings, and the silver crown return, and Minas trineth in peace, Minas Anor again, as full of light, high and fair, beautiful as a queen among other queens. Did anyone understand that? I'm sure some of you are great fans of Lord of the Rings and know exactly what he's talking about. But for those of you who haven't read the books or watched the films, don't worry, you're not the only one who's a little bit in the dark. So is our friend Captain Picard. Captain Picard, no idea what Faramir is talking about. So what should Faramir have done instead? Before diving into exactly what he wants to say, he first needs to evaluate who his audience is. He needs to think about, okay, is this person I'm talking with, have they read Lord of the Rings or have they watched the films? As soon as he understands where his audience is coming from and what their universe looks like, then he knows where to start. And the good rule of thumb, if you have no idea about the background of your audience before your presentation, ask. Ask whoever's setting up the conference. If you have a chance to chat with people beforehand, ask them, hey, what do you know about this? What's your background? And then it'll help you tailor your communication to approach them correctly. So this is the thing about communication is we spend so much time living in our own little universe that can be hard for us to understand that there's this whole rich ecosystem outside of all these other fields and disciplines and skills and talents that we might not have been personally exposed to, and that people we're talking with, they might be experts in these areas. And we have to try to figure out how to build a bridge between what we know and what they know. Because if we can't build that bridge, then we're just stuck in Middle Earth and there's no way for us to get communication to the Starship Enterprise. So obviously, the Lord of the Rings has been a metaphor for high energy physics research. So let's get a little bit into the different types of audiences we can have when we're trying to figure out how to stage our communication. So at the very tippy top of the pyramid, these are the people that you're working with directly. So in the physics experiments, this would be like your analysis group. These people, they've been following your project the whole way along, and they already have all that background information. The way you talk with them could be very different than how you talk with people who are just on the periphery. Perhaps your supervisor or someone who's heading the department. They will have a very different understanding and knowledge than the people you're working with directly. And then this differs greatly if you're talking with someone outside, such as someone who might have an interest in taking your project and applying it to other purposes. And this is entirely different than how you would talk with someone who has never been exposed to physics or computing at all. So when we think about how we communicate, we always have to keep in mind, it's not about us anymore. It doesn't matter how funny or witty or clear or how good our diction is. It only matters how our audience receives and interprets that information. It's about them. So when you're trying to figure out how to explain a topic or a project to your audience, you need to always consider, who is your audience? What do they want to know? And why do they want to know it? And you're going to take these three factors, and those are going to be how you center your communication and decide exactly the correct way to explain your project to them so that they're able to value and appreciate it. Now, another important thing in communication is it can be really difficult to know when to change the topic. So maybe this thing that you think is the most important part of your project turns out your audience isn't as interested in. So it is possible, if you decide this is so important, I have to explain it to them, and they're just not feeling it, if you're getting these kinds of signals, you can always back up and try a different technique and approach. So that was just a very quick introduction to communication, and especially how to do communication when we're talking with audiences who are outside our direct field. I hope you're able to take some of these skills and apply them during the Webfest, and have a great weekend. Bye.
So, hi again, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that short video from Sarah. Without any further ado, I'd like then to hand over to all of you here in the Zoom chat, and perhaps we can discuss some of those ideas that Sarah's raised. If anyone has any questions, any opinions about what they've seen, then please share them with the group. The floor is open.
I feel like it's a good idea to be clear and concise when presenting your ideas and not using like too many technical terms that you might be familiar with and like other people might not be.
Yes, I mean, I agree entirely. I believe that was Satyam who was speaking just then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Sorry,
I mean,
my cam is a little shoddy. I wasn't able to like turn on my video.
Oh, I'm sorry about that, but thank you anyway for your input. Yes, I think you know, as Sarah said, the key thing is to think about your audience, what often your audience is, and what their level of knowledge is likely to be of your subject and the jargon associated with it. There's a nice quote from a former science journalist with the Guardian newspaper in the UK, somebody called Tim Radford. He said that the classic mistake of science journalism in this case, although it also applies to science communication, is to underestimate your audience's intelligence while at the same time overestimating their specific knowledge of your subject. And I think that's very much the message that came through very clearly from Sarah's talk. Does anyone else have any questions either about science communication in general or about how they would try to apply these lessons to their presentation and the other work that they're doing throughout the Webfest this weekend?
I have one, if that's okay. Sorry.
Please, by all means. Hi, Sarah.
Hi. How is it best to work out what level the people you're going to be presenting to are at? Because obviously, like, a child at 8 has a very different knowledge level to, say, a teenager. Like, how would you work out where is the ideal level to pitch at, and like what would be new and what they would know already?
Okay, so this is just my own opinion here, but I would really echo again what Sarah has said about asking people where possible. Always ask. You know, don't be afraid. You know, to spend time at the beginning of any presentation or any kind of communication activity to really ask people what they do and don't know. If you take a step back from science communication and go to sort of broader communication and public relations, there's a well-established practice of focus grouping and trying to understand through that what people's level of knowledge is. I also encourage that where possible, particularly for maybe education projects such as the ones I think you're perhaps working on, Sarah. Also, you know, on top of that, there are always going to be situations where you don't know exactly how much people do or don't know about your topic before you start communicating on it. So my personal advice would be that it's always better to pitch slightly lower than you might deem necessary, because if you communicate in a clear and concise manner, you can take people with you on a journey. Whereas if you miss those first initial steps, then it can be very hard for people. People can become lost and frustrated. So it's about communicating the basics in a clear manner without going into too much extraneous detail that it becomes boring for everybody, and then really stepping that up at an appropriate pace for your audience and bringing people on that journey with you. Now, I appreciate that's easier said than done, but that's the theory at least.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Sarah. Is there anybody else? Perhaps people have questions for one another as well. Is there anybody else perhaps also on the call that has done some work in science communication and might like to share their views on these matters?
I'd like to ask a question, please. It's a question to the participants of what do you see as the main challenge in communicating what you've done in this Webfest? I'd love to hear anyone's input on that.
Well, that's a great question. Is there anyone that would like to come in and share their thoughts on that? I guess not, unfortunately. But Miriam, perhaps you have some thoughts on this, because I know we're certainly asking something very challenging from you all in terms of presenting your weekend's work in just a 1-minute presentation on the Sunday afternoon.
For sure. And I would go back to Sarah's slide on the 3 things you need to add together to get how you present. I think for such a small presentation of 1 minute, the most important is probably the why do they care aspect. So I think that should be the baseline of what you set your video on, and then you can build on top of that.
Yeah, that sounds like good advice. I see we've got Anastasia joining us as well. Hi, Anastasia.
Sorry, we had a lot of messages to reply to, some issues, but I'm here. Sorry for being late. If I may quickly jump in, Marine, I only heard your question. And if I may just add from myself, I think one of the barriers probably to successful communication for our participants might be that is shyness, maybe, because yesterday during the networking session via Remotely Green, I met 2 participants, and I got a feeling that they were really unconfident with their skills, and if they are, so to say, good enough to contribute to a project and to present it. Of course, all of you are here and all of you are great. So please don't be shy, don't worry, don't hesitate. Just go ahead. It's a new experience also for all of us. So just trust in yourself, be confident, and don't be afraid to present your projects that you've been working on so hard during the weekends. You deserve an acknowledgement, and your project deserves an acknowledgement. So please just don't be afraid and don't be shy. Nothing bad can happen. So it's a new experience. Just take this chance, use this opportunity, and you won't regret about it.
Great, thank you, Anastasia. I echo Anastasia's comments wholeheartedly. You know, this is at some level, of course, the Webfest is a competition, but you know, it's really about having fun and about learning some new skills, meeting some new friends, and sharing creativity. So now is the time to have fun, express yourselves, and ask your questions and share your perspectives on things, no matter what your level of expertise might be.
Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you, Daniel. That's a very nice story, and I have to say I hadn't heard that before. Speaking myself as a professional science communicator, I agree wholeheartedly that it's all about iteratively improving one's message. You know, we have messages in our daily work with CERN Open Lab, and Anastasia and I work together on communication for CERN Open Lab, and we improve our messaging over time. You know, we don't always get everything right first time round, but the important thing is to set up the right structures in place so that you can assess the efficacy of your communications and improve them iteratively over a period of time. And that's the way we all get better at anything, whether it's science communication or any other skill. So I've seen just now that Mohammed Samid has joined the Zoom chat. Mohammed, can you hear me? Possibly not.
Oh, I think Mohammed, you're muted. Probably if you are talking, just turn on.
Okay. Well, I would like to introduce a initiative that Mohammed is organizing at CERN for a few months from now. Daniel, if you could perhaps show the slide, just while you're all here, given that you've expressed an interest in science communication, we just wanted to flag up this upcoming hackathon, which Mohammed, who is participating in the Webfest, and also Hans Bechler, who you all met earlier today, are organizing, as well as a number of other people. And it is to be organized in winter, so Northern Hemisphere winter. So about 6 months from now. And it's a hackathon specifically dedicated to science communication, and it's being organized at CERN. So I encourage you all, if you're interested in science communication and hackathons, to visit the web address that you saw on the slide there. That's scicomhack.com. And there you can find out more information. And we'll paste that link also on the Matamos channels. Okay, so I think that's about all for this session. I hope that it's been useful for you. If you have any other questions related to science communication throughout the weekend, ask our mentors. You can also ask Anastasia and I. Will be on Matamos at various points throughout the weekend. And good luck. Thank you very much again.
Good luck,
We'll speak to you later.
Thanks.